I hate ads and you do too, so make sure to use an ad block and sponsor block in your browser or mobile app. I work very hard to make content, and if you'd like to donate, head to my Ko-Fi and make a one-time donation or get a membership to have your name in videos. Thanks for watching. Ugh. Oh my god, okay. Fuck me. Not the hospital again, man. What happened, Doc? The past few... What? I can't be twiddling my flippers, Doc. I got fans and stuff. I gotta make content. Listen, I appreciate it, Doc, but I gotta get out of this place one way or another. And... Oh, fucking hell, what's happening?
The numbers, Linux. What do they mean? Where are they broadcast from?
I don't know anything about any numbers.
It's amazing. Watch how it unleashes the power of oxygen, making tough stains disappear like magic without fading or bleeding the colors. For pet messes, it is a must. It goes deep down below the surface to get rid of the stain and the odor. Have you ever spilled?
I gotta get out of here.
Linux 2D. Tuxology.
And the other thing is that a beginner shouldn't be installing operating systems. Go to a user group and find someone who loves installing the system to help people. I've never installed GNU/Linux.
They wanted to make their programs that they used be as good as they could. They also wanted to make them do neat things. They wanted to be able to do something in a more exciting way than anyone believed possible.
It's too late! What the hell am I supposed to do? What do you want me to do? Start over? There's no option. You must pronounce the confession of the faith. You must say, there is no system but GNU, and Linux is one of its kernels.
The university.
Sorry, stop trying to come up with these theoretical proofs that it had to be done.
I have a worse problem now. I have cancer. It's a kind of lymphoma. Fortunately,
Richard Matthew Stallman, frequently referred to as RMS, is the de facto face of free and open source software. Stallman founded the Free Software Foundation and most famously spearheaded GNU, a project that fosters the creation of portable free and open source software intended to build a complete operating system. While these accolades have left an indelible and important mark on not just open source computing, but technology in general, Stallman has been the subject of scrutinization for his awkward and oftentimes extremely unusual behaviors, and his staunch, brutal honesty regarding his stances on various political concerns. Free and open source ideologues are put in a difficult position due to Stallman's divisive rhetoric, as his contributions to computer software are constantly being weighed against his personal beliefs. But how did Stallman's GNU come about? And by extension, what set the stage for its creation?
Well, what's GNU plus Linux? In 1984, I began developing an operating system
which is a free software replacement for Unix. The combination of Linux and the incomplete GNU system made a complete free operating system, achieving the goal that I had announced in 1983.
Modern computing in its formative years was punctuated by cumbersome mainframe systems that spanned whole rooms. Despite these monsters reigning supreme during the early to mid 20th century, something was missing. Before the concept of an operating system was genuinely solidified, computers ran instructions through being hardwired to run dedicated programs, which means the computer is solely designed for such tasks and literally can't do anything else. Computers were, as mentioned, huge and ran things like calculations, equations, or were used to aid in weather forecasting. If the program wasn't hardwired into the computer itself, other general-purpose computers before timeshare systems, which are systems that are capable of serving multiple users access to CPU time, would be shared by many users one at a time, taking turns running and compiling programs. This manner of use would require that users literally line up in a physical queue so that they could run programs through punch cards or magnetic tape, which contained program instructions. A genuinely unified operating system was unheard of before Unix, which was born from the ashes of a timeshare operating system, Multics. Multics was abandoned by Bell Labs mid-development during the late 60s. The four men commonly credited with taking up the mantle, Ken Thompson, Dennis Ritchie, Douglas McIlroy, and Joe Osana, had created Unix around 1970 and subsequently created history. Unix was the first truly unified operating system, in spite of other OSs that were very specific in their application and compatibility, usually tailor-made for the systems they were used on. Unix was also the first operating system coded in C. This is on account of the fact that C was created by lead Unix developer Dennis Ritchie. C is a programming language that continues to be widely used to this day. The C programming language paved the way for derivative Unix-like projects that also employ C, such as GNU and Linux. Standards such as POSIX and the file system hierarchy structure, which is most popularly used in Linux, were developed based off of Unix's design. When asked about his thoughts on GNU, Unix developer Dennis Ritchie said, "The true GNU philosophy is more extreme than I care for. At the same time, much of it seems to have to do with recreating things we or others had already done." These claims are debatable, however, as despite GNU's designation as a Unix-like system, Unix was always entirely proprietary software, and GNU's core principles allowed it to separate itself from Unix.
We are trying to make computing as simple as possible. In the late 1960s, Dennis Ritchie and I realized that the then current operating systems were much too complex. We attempted to reverse this trend by building a small, simple operating system on a mini computer.
Well, what we wanted to preserve was not just a good programming environment in which to do programming, but a system around which a community could form, fellowship. We knew from experience that the essence of communal computing, as supplied by remote access time-sharing systems, is not just to type programs into a terminal instead of a key punch, but to encourage close communication.
The Unix system started out as a two-man effort, and by now it's used all over Bell Labs. We have close to 20,000 computer terminals in this company, roughly one per employee, and most of them are used for communicating with Unix systems. One of the main reasons the Unix system is popular around here is because it provides graceful facilities for decomposing complex computing tasks into simple subtasks.
Amid the development and subsequent evolution of operating systems, chiefly Unix, monetizing and restricting software as well as the modification of such was becoming commonplace. Before this, computers were mainly developed and used by researchers, the government, and academics. Unix's release marked a breakthrough in OS unification and therefore ease of development and integration. Corporate and academic interests were growing, and computers only became more common. During the 1970s, restrictive licensing as well as monetization had begun to seep into all forms of computer software. AT&T, the developers of Unix, begun restricting the redistribution of modified versions of Unix in the 70s. By the time the 80s rolled around, AT&T outright refused to distribute Unix for free, even to researchers, instead opting to sell licenses for the source code. As a result of the restrictive licensing and rising prevalence of software monetization, the landscape for free software was seemingly dry. However, free software had prospered on a smaller scale through hacker culture. During and after the 1960s, when computing was evolving at a steady rate, the term hacker was used to describe someone who was passionate about programming and leveraged their programming skills for the purpose of surmounting perceived technological limits. People in the hacking sphere were splintered into several groups, those of which would develop and share software with one another. Save a few informal groups of passionate hackers doing so, there was no established group of tenets to adhere to concerning free software as a whole, although hacker culture chronicled the makings of free and open source culture. An article by the website Open Source 4U entitled Hackers in the Open Source Revolution describes hacker ethic, a term coined by Stephen Levy. The hacker ethic was a new way of life with a philosophy, an ethic, and a dream. However, the elements of this hacker ethic were not openly debated and discussed, rather they were accepted and silently agreed upon. Free and open source software has evolved from the hacker ethics that Levy described. The hackers who stay true to the hacker ethics, especially the hands-on imperative, are usually supporters of the free and open source software movement. Nearly 10 years after the birth of Unix, a myriad of programmers at the University of California, led by computer engineer Bill Joy, had developed the first version of BSD. BSD is important with regards to free software thanks to its very permissive licensing. However, BSD's truly free licenses did not come about until the 90s. Many erroneously claim that BSD predates GNU in its pursuit to create a free operating system. However, BSD began as source available, not open source. Source available usually denotes additional rules that limit the user's ability to access and modify code. BSD also contained a proprietary Unix code up until the early 1990s with the release of Net 2, and conclusively wasn't comparable nor a direct inspiration for GNU. BSD did show what was possible with regards to Unix-like OSs though, and may have served as an indirect inspiration.
So when it came time to do the 4.2 manuals, we decided, well, we have to have some cover art, and so there was a black and white demon, sort of a line drawing demon that was done, and this appeared on the cover, and he's standing there with his trident, and there's this glowing orb that's sort of casting a shadow over him, and on the orb it says Unix. So this came out, and AT&T just went absolutely nonlinear. How can you put Unix on the cover of a BSD manual? BSD is not Unix. Get that off. So when the reprints came out, we just carefully airbrushed Unix off the glowing.
Richard Stallman details his personal life in a very methodical manner, setting aside a page on his website stallman.org for the express purpose of displaying his personal biography. Born in 1953, Stallman graduated Harvard in 1974 in physics. He worked at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab from 1971 to 1984, developing system software including the first extensible text editor Emacs, plus the AI technique of dependency-directed backtracking, also known as truth maintenance. Nowadays, Stallman focuses on political advocacy for free software and its ethical ideas. He spends most of the year traveling to speak on topics such as free software and your freedom, and copyright versus community in the age of the computer networks. Another topic is a free digital society, which treats several different threats to the freedom of computer users today. Stallman also offers more information on his early life through interviews. An interview conducted by Rob Lucas on behalf of the New Left Review, entitled Talking to the Mailman, describes a bit more of Stallman's life leading up to the creation of GNU.
I was a behavioral problem. I couldn't go to a public school without getting in trouble, and started working with computers at an early age.
Stallman also lived at the MIT AI lab inside of his office until 1998. Insight was provided by Stallman about how sharing computers through time-sharing systems had influenced his conception of the free software movement.
At the MIT AI lab, the hackers were the authors of the software and were also in charge of the machine. We developed a culture of welcoming everyone to come and work on everything and share, so we resisted security measures. Anyone could look at anyone else's terminal through the system.
Richard Stallman's entire life is punctuated by his proactivity, his vested ability to deduce the problems around him and do something about them. This was an instrumental factor and possibly the main reason why Stallman decided to pursue GNU in the first place. Stallman's strong identity as a hacker also contributed to his sense of scrutinization and commitment to innovation. Stallman's very own autobiography, entitled Free as in Freedom, details an account that is emblematic of this, describing Stallman during his days as a programmer at the MIT AI lab, wherein he modified printer software as to notify other users inside the lab when the printer was jammed. As fixes go, Stallman's was oblique but elegant. It didn't fix the mechanical side of the problem, but it did the next best thing by closing the information loop between user and machine. Thanks to a few additional lines of software code, AI Lab employees could eliminate the 10 or 15 minutes wasted each week in running back and forth to check on the printer. After applying this fix, Stallman then attempted to do so with a printer gifted to the lab by Xerox. However, he soon discovered that the software for the printer was closed source and thus could not be modified with the same fix as before. This experience, presented early in the book, is an impetus for the creation of GNU.
Free software is the first battle in the liberation of cyberspace. Who controls your computer? Is it you? Or is it some big company that's really controlling it? How do you stop being the victim? Formerly, you had to stop using computers, but not anymore. Now you can come join us in the free world that we've built. In 1983, I announced I would develop a completely free software operating system called GNU. In 1992, we had it almost finished, but one piece was missing, the kernel. Linus Torvalds in that year freed his kernel Linux, which filled the last gap and gave us the first complete system you could run on a PC, GNU plus Linux.
In Chapter 7 of Stallman's autobiography, Free as in Freedom, extensive context is given regarding Stallman's initial proposal for GNU, which took the form of a Usenet message on September 27, 1983. On September 27, 1983, computer programmers logging onto the Usenet newsgroup net.unix.wizards encountered an unusual message. Posted in the small hours of the morning, 12:30 a.m. to be exact, and signed by RMS at MIT-OZ, the message's subject line was terse but attention-grabbing.
New Unix implementation,
it read. Instead of introducing a newly released version of Unix, however, the message's opening paragraph issued a call to arms.
Starting this Thanksgiving, I'm going to write a complete Unix-compatible software system called GNU, for GNU's not Unix, and give it away free to everyone who can use it. Contributions of time, money, programs, and equipment are greatly needed.
To an experienced Unix developer, the message was a mixture of idealism and hubris. Not only did the author pledge to rebuild the already mature Unix operating system from the ground up, he also proposed to improve it in places. Stallman's initial proposal seemed overly ambitious and a tinge self-aggrandizing. For people who were not convinced of his vision, Stallman detailed his accomplishments as to prove that he was fit for the task.
I am Richard Stallman, inventor of the original, much imitated Emacs editor, now at the Artificial Intelligence Lab at MIT. I have worked extensively on compilers, editors, debuggers, command interpreters, the incompatible time-sharing system, and the Lisp machine operating system.
Development began on GNU shortly after. Stallman had written the GNU Manifesto, a series of passages meant to figuratively sell GNU to possible contributors, in early 1985. He had also drafted the GNU General Public License during the same year. These events are also detailed in his autobiography. Thus, Stallman concluded that use of copyright was not necessarily unethical. What was bad about software copyright was the way it was typically used and designed to be used, to deny the user essential freedoms. Most authors imagined no other way to use it, but copyright could be used in a different way, to make a program free and assure its continued freedom. By GNU Emacs 16 in early 1985, Stallman drafted a copyright-based license that gave users the right to make and distribute copies. It also gave users the right to make and distribute modified versions, but only under the same license. Inspiration for the GPL also arose from a litany of derivative text editors based off of Stallman's Emacs text editor, primarily Gosmax. Stallman took issue with Gosmax specifically, as Gosmax took from Emacs and was proprietary, betraying Stallman's original intentions for his code. They could not exercise the unlimited power of copyright over those modified versions, so they could not make their versions proprietary as Gosmax was, and they had to make the source code available. Those conditions closed the legal gap that would otherwise allow restricted, non-free versions of GNU Emacs to emerge. Stallman originally intended to use the GPL only for Emacs. However, his lawyer had informed him that other people in the greater hacker community were taking notice of the GPL and told him to broaden the license's language for the purpose of adapting it to any and all software that which may utilize it. The GPL represented hacker ethic in a form that was communicable and potentially widely applicable. It wasn't long, Gilmore says, before other hackers began discussing ways to port the GNU Emacs license over to their own programs. Prompted by a conversation on Usenet, Gilmore sent an email to Stallman in November 1986, suggesting modification. You should probably remove Emacs from the license and replace it with software or something. Soon, we hope, Emacs will not be the biggest part of the GNU system and the license applies to all of it. Soon enough, during and after the late 80s, a nearly complete GNU system was underway.
Lots of organizations, lots of companies, lots of public agencies, and lots of individuals already use GNU/Linux. It's not particularly hard to use, it's just different. So you have to make a certain effort in order to move to freedom.
The impetus for Linux's creation was also detailed in Stallman's autobiography. In summary, Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, lacked means to access his university's Minivac system from home. This was due to the fact that Minix, his personal computer's operating system, did not have terminal emulation capabilities, which meant that he could not operate the university's Unix system remotely. Minix was very light, proprietary, and meant for purely educational usage. Frustrated by his lack of options, Torvalds opted to program a terminal emulator himself in the early 90s. In an act that is referred to as ambitious, Torvalds decided to not only program a terminal emulator, but a kernel comparable to Minix as well. This manifested in a post analogous to Stallman's prior proposal for GNU. Hello everybody out there using Minix, I'm doing a free operating system, just a hobby, won't be big and professional like GNU, for 386, 486 AT clones. This has been brewing since April and is starting to get ready. I'd like any feedback on things people like or dislike in Minix, as my OS resembles it somewhat. Same physical layout of the file system due to practical reasons, among other things. This initial introduction to Linux was erroneously phrased as though Torvalds was creating a free operating system similar to that of Stallman's GNU. However, as we all know, Torvalds' sole kernel was actually the missing piece that would later complete GNU and precipitate the mass adoption of Linux across millions of computers. Torvalds adopted GNU as the system that would employ Linux as its kernel, thus creating GNU/Linux. Torvalds initially did not use the GNU public license as he was afraid of Linux being taken, re-implemented, and stolen by some big corporate entity. Torvalds would later feel an obligation to liberate Linux and use the GPL, as he acknowledged that in using GNU components, he would be remiss not to pay it back and allow people to distribute Linux themselves. Torvalds also vehemently respected the GNU project's vision and wanted to be a part of it. Torvalds cited a speech conducted by Richard Stallman at the Polytechnic University in Helsinki in 1991 as the influence that led to him changing Linux's license. I may not have seen the light, but I guess something from his speech sunk in. Stallman admits to envying Torvalds' worldwide identity as the main symbol of free software, given that Stallman has dedicated his life to fighting for it. One anecdote in Stallman's autobiography describes a t-shirt paying homage to the original promotional art for Star Wars, displaying Stallman as R2-D2 in the midst of Torvalds, portrayed much like Luke Skywalker. Stallman obviously felt misrepresented as a sidekick alongside Torvalds, and hasn't quite recovered his reservations regarding Torvalds' supposed role in the community. Stallman also frequently voices his disdain for people referring to GNU/Linux as Linux. There are multiple written iterations, those of which act as Stallman's thinly veiled attempts at bringing more attention to what he views as a severe issue. Unfortunately, most people never refer to Linux in such a way, including me. One such example is presented in the official GNU website written by Stallman himself.
Whether you use GNU/Linux or not, please don't confuse the public by using the name Linux ambiguously. Linux is the kernel, one of the essential major parts of the system. The system as a whole is basically the GNU system, with Linux added. When you're talking about this combination, please call it GNU/Linux.
People who don't have the money to fight them in court.
So if I may be forgiven the sin, patenting a loop could be considered a form of circular reasoning?
I don't know. Anyway.
Very justified. Thank you, people. Second question, and I will make it quick. I don't want to block the line for too long.
I would be remiss not to mention Richard Stallman's reputation as a complete and utter weirdo. Now, keep in mind that I do not mean this in a derogatory or patronizing manner, as this weirdness is more of an idiosyncrasy than it is a flaw. Stallman is socially inept, poor at adequately expressing his thoughts at times, and routinely acts unusually. For context, it has been rumored and unofficially agreed upon in the wider community that Stallman suffers from a fairly potent form of autism. This disallows him from conducting himself in ways that would be considered socially normative.
Okay, commenting on the death of Steve Jobs, you're quoted to say, "I'm not glad he's dead, but I'm glad he's gone."
Your phone might be listening to our conversation right now. So I call this Stalin's dream. Because if Stalin, please don't break in on me to stop me from talking.
No,
please don't do
I
that.
agree. I try to agree.
Yeah.
This also requires that Stallman defines what pushes him out of his comfort zone for the sake of communicability and efficiency when he tends to public events. Stallman, whilst being pushed outside of his boundaries, has been cited as prone to having outbursts and acting generally disagreeable. A famous example of Stallman's oddness is a video featuring the free software savior eating something off of his bare feet during a public event. This video has gained infamy among supporters and outsiders alike and only contributed to Stallman's reputation as a very weird person. Anecdotal testimonies have been presented claiming that Stallman is difficult or undesirable to be around. You know, the feet thing was obviously disgusting, but I was surprised by how few people mentioned what an ass he made himself look like with just his attitude. Attacking people asking questions for their pronunciation, getting caught up on language he deems political or propaganda. Of course, it doesn't end there. Stallman brazenly displays all of his personal habits and general beliefs on a page on his personal website, fittingly christened Lifestyle. You will begin to notice how absorbent Stallman's mind is with regards to any and all kinds of information he can get his hands on.
I do not have a favorite food, a favorite book, a favorite song, a favorite joke, a favorite flower, or a favorite butterfly. My tastes don't work that way. In general, in any area of art and sensation, there are many ways for something to be good, and they cannot be compared and ordered. I can't judge whether I like chocolate better or noodles better because I like them in different ways. Thus, I cannot determine which food is my favorite. Music genres I often like include some Spanish folk music, but not flamenco, Latvian folk music, Swedish folk fiddling, Moroccan traditional music, soukous, Balkan folk dance music, Turkish folk dance music, Turkish classical music, Armenian folk dance music, Georgian choral music. I am an atheist, for scientific reasons. The religious theory of the natural world is this way because a god decided to make it this way does not explain anything. It only replaces each question with another question, an answerable one. When I need to call someone, I ask someone nearby to let me make a call. If I use someone else's cell phone, that doesn't give Big Brother any information about me.
Stallman cited his disliking of ties as the first time that he recognized what he calls victim co-perpetrating, which is the basis of his criticism regarding non-free software and Facebook specifically. Stallman also professes his love for the unofficial holiday Gravmas, a holiday held on the birthday of Isaac Newton dedicated to celebrating his achievements. Stallman does not celebrate any holiday other than Gravmas, including Christmas.
Merry Gravmas, everyone. Gravmas is the celebration of comprehensible physical laws on Isaac Newton's birthday, December 25th. Merry Gravmas.
Stallman made it a rule for himself that he would never have any children. The main reason for this, he explains, is that having a child is going to eventually lead to a global heating disaster. Besides the wealth of information that is Stallman's lifestyle page, Stallman has gained infamy for his famous writer. Now, in the celebrity world, a writer is a special piece of legal documentation made for the purpose of detailing requirements in order for a celebrity to perform. These requirements may range from legal to personal. Stallman's writer is infamous for listing unusual prerequisites or being entirely nonsensical at points. Stallman's writer is also descriptive to a fault and provides information that is far beyond the scope of any normal individual. A few examples of this lunacy include Stallman asking that he be provided with a host that owns a friendly parrot if possible, then proceeding to condemn procuring a wild captured parrot, as it will be emotionally scarred. Stallman also pleads hosts not to help him do basic tasks like cross the street, as he feels like a tyrant for it.
If it is night and the stars are beautiful, I hesitate to say so, lest my host feel obligated to try to get one for me.
You can't make this up, even if you tried. Stallman also provides an extensive list of his least favorite food and drink.
Avocado, eggplant, usually, there are occasional exceptions, hot pepper, olives, liver, even in trace quantities, stomach and intestine, other organ meats, cooked tuna, oysters, egg yolk, if the taste is noticeable, except when boiled, completely hard. Many strong cheeses, especially those with green fungus. Desserts that often contain fruit or liquor flavors. Sour fruits, such as grapefruit, and many oranges. Beer.
Stallman also writes the perfect temperature required for him to sleep soundly. Besides Stallman's writer, the best and perhaps the most popular example of his weirdness presents itself in the Free Software song, a song written and performed by Stallman about, you guessed it, free software.
Por ejemplo, es este ritmo. Join us now and share the software. You'll be free, hackers, you'll be free. Join us now and share the software. You'll be free, hackers, you'll be free. Hoarders can get piles of money. That is true, hackers, that is true.
but they cannot help their neighbors. That's not good, hackers, that's not good.
Okay, this is not a question that I want to ask, but what after Richard M. Stallman, what will happen to Free Software Foundation?
I won't see it.
Yeah, but have you ensured that there are people?
I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a person to recommend as my successor.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I did, but what can I do?
Do you...
Richard Stallman has been involved in numerous controversies involving his political beliefs, as well as his characteristically brash and clueless attitude regarding these beliefs. Despite making an effort to separate his opinions from that of the Free Software Foundation, Stallman has continued to cause disorder among his peers in his organization. Stallman documents his takes to an almost obsessive degree, having maintained his personal political notes for over 20 years. Covering all or even a small portion of these political notes would be a monumental task in and of itself. Simply clicking the hyperlinks associated with each entry would lead someone into a dizzying maze of rhetoric. One such entry, made on September 16, 2019, was simply entitled Resignation, and read,
"To the MIT community, I am resigning effective immediately from my position in CSAIL at MIT. I am doing this due to pressure on MIT and me over a series of misunderstandings and mischaracterizations."
Now, one might read this entry and assume that Stallman and MIT had come to something of a mutual agreement and parted ways. Unfortunately, that was not what had occurred. On that very same day, the FSF posted a similarly nondescript message on their official website. So, what was the fuss? Well, on September 11, 2019, Stallman had made a few questionable remarks about an alleged case involving Jeffrey Epstein coercing a young into having sex with famed MIT computer scientist Marvin Minsky. The offending comment reads as follows.
We can imagine many scenarios, but the most plausible scenario is that she presented herself as entirely willing. Assuming she was being coerced by Epstein, he would have every reason to tell her to conceal that from most of his associates.
Now, news publications had jumped onto this comment and assumed that Richard Stallman was condoning or even endorsing Minsky's, and by extension, Epstein's actions. As to preface my coverage on this topic, I don't believe that this email exchange was necessary to begin with, and I don't personally support Stallman's decision to make a concerted effort to qualify notions regarding Epstein and his victims in internal channels. With that being said, tabloids took Stallman's comment, that being the idea that Epstein coerced his victims into acting like they were willing, and misconstrued it, claiming that Stallman simply said that Epstein's victims were willing outright. As to whether or not MIT believed the same thing is unclear, but Stallman's discussion by itself does justify some form of penalization no matter the conclusion. On the 14th of September 2019, Stallman released a post on his official website that attempted to quell the miasma of criticism that had been following him by deliberating on his own condemnation of Jeffrey Epstein and his actions.
I want to respond to the misleading media coverage of messages I posted about Marvin Minsky's association with Jeffrey Epstein. The coverage totally mischaracterized my statements. Headlines say I defended Epstein. Nothing could be further from the truth. I've called him a serial rapist, and he deserved to be imprisoned, but many people now believe I defended him and other inaccurate claims, and feel a real hurt because of what they believe I said. I'm sorry for that hurt. I wish I could have prevented the misunderstanding.
As to preface with my own personal statement regarding this chapter, I personally abhor Stallman's prior and present opinions and statements regarding pedophilia and sexual crimes of any kind. Richard Stallman resigned from the Free Software Foundation on September 16, 2019. On March 22, 2021, Stallman made a return to the board of directors.
I'm now on the Free Software Foundation Board of Directors once again.
This news was met with unanimous skepticism and led to a maelstrom of supporters immediately backing out. Red Hat, 3 days after Stallman's return, spoke out, decrying the FSF's negligence. Richard Stallman's return has reopened wounds we had hoped would slowly heal after his departure. The FSFE, or Free Software Foundation Europe, a charity organization that shares goals with the FSF, called for the FSF to take action and remove Stallman from all of his positions at the FSF as soon as possible. The FSF needs to seriously reflect on this decision as well as their decision-making process to prevent similar issues from happening again. Therefore, in the current situation, we see ourselves unable to collaborate both with the FSF and any other organization in which Richard Stallman has a leading position. Stallman's return had caused complete pandemonium in the free software community, with polarization afflicting every forum that dared discuss it. You were either with or against Stallman. There was no in-between. Many were vehemently critical of Stallman and listed his previous transgressions as they considered him a reprehensible degenerate. Others were happy to forgive him and allow him to take charge of free software once again. An open letter was drafted, signed by thousands, agreeing with Stallman's decision to return. Removing RMS will hurt FSF's image and deal a significant blow to the momentum of the free software movement. As you can imagine, an open letter was made campaigning for just the opposite. However, this letter was much more drastic, calling for not only Stallman, but the entire FSF board of directors to be removed. Not only that, but this letter also demanded that Stallman be removed from the GNU project, a project he created and had been in charge of for nearly 40 years. We are calling for the removal of the entire board of the Free Software Foundation. These are people who have enabled and empowered RMS for years. They demonstrate this again by permitting him to rejoin the FSF board. It is time for RMS to step back from the free software, tech ethics, digital rights, and tech communities, for he cannot provide the leadership we need. We are also calling for Richard M. Stallman to be removed from all leadership positions, including the GNU project. Big organizations like the Xorg project, the GNOME project, Mozilla, and the OBS project had signed for Stallman and the board of directors to be removed as well. One interesting thing to consider about these open letters is that both of them were made no more than a day following Stallman's return. If you had any reason to believe the free software community wasn't intensely divided over this issue, the punctuality of these letters would suggest otherwise. About a month after his return, Stallman wrote a personal address to the free software community, specifically those that called for his permanent removal.
Some have described me as being tone deaf, and that is fair. With my difficulty in understanding social cues, that tends to happen. I've learned something from this about how to be kind to people who have been hurt. In the future, that will help me be kind to people in other situations, which is what I hope to do.
Those who had admonished Stallman and his previous controversies were not satisfied by what they considered a complete non-apology. Despite Stallman's response, as well as the FSF remaining steadfast in their decision to keep him, one outspoken critic would not let up. Meet Drew DeVault, the founder and CEO of SourceHut, as well as a contributor to projects in the foss community like Wayland. You can't mention DeVault's name without uttering Stallman's as well. Drew DeVault is Stallman's most outspoken critic. On DeVault's personal blog, a post was made on November 25, 2023 entitled Richard Stallman's Political Discourse on Sex, in which DeVault criticizes Stallman and all those that are in support of him due to the fact that Stallman has expressed extremely concerning political opinions, those of which have led to many calling Stallman a pedophile apologist. DeVault cites many questionable statements by Stallman, such as,
Hi Learnings viewers, I just want to interrupt Learnings to say that these quotes they're by Richard Stallman, okay? They are in fact by Richard Stallman, okay? I do not believe in what he says. I am not associated with Richard Stallman in any way, okay? I do not have any personal contact with him, okay? I do not believe in his beliefs. I do not enforce this and endorse this, okay? This is me, Patrick, speaking, okay? Back to the video. There is little evidence to justify the widespread assumption that willing participation in pedophilia hurts children. Many years ago, I posted that I could see nothing wrong about sex between an adult and child. if the child accepted it.
Stallman also makes a very explicit distinction between children and teenagers. He declares children to be 13 to 14 at the oldest, with teenagers being any older. Stallman's fixation on this distinction leads to lines of reasoning that understate sexual crimes against minors. In some cases, however, these statements actually completely sidestep the idea that a crime was committed at all.
UN peacekeepers accused of child rape in South Sudan. But the article makes it pretty clear that the children involved were not children, they were teenagers.
This slew of controversy would not end with this blog post. A website functioning as a hit piece targeted at Stallman, detailing his controversial statements, entitled The Stallman Report, was anonymously created by Drew DeVault on October 14, 2024. This report gained wide attention from many in the foss community, and only continues to divide people. I'm not going to cover the full breadth of the report, as there is simply too much to go over. However, it further elaborates on many of the main points expressed in DeVault's blog post. A website endorsed by Stallman himself, entitled stallmansupport.org, has also been making a continuous effort to debunk and rationalize the mass criticism regarding Stallman's political statements.
I have a worse problem now. I have cancer. It's a kind of lymphoma. Fortunately, it can be managed, and I'll probably be around for many more years.
Even 3 years after Stallman's return to FSF, the foss community is still reeling from the ordeal. However, DeVault's report on Stallman has resurrected discourse about him. On September 27, 2023, Richard Stallman revealed in the GNU 40th Hacker meeting that he has been battling non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a blood cancer that affects the lymph nodes. Stallman had been undergoing treatment for an undisclosed amount of time prior to the Hacker meeting, wherein he announced his diagnosis. As a result, he was shown completely hairless. Stallman's prognosis apparently came out looking good, so we should be still hearing from him in the future. It seems that Stallman himself harbors no plans to leave or postpone his business at the FSF or the GNU project. As for Stallman's future endeavors, we truly have no way of knowing for the moment. As it stands, Richard Stallman continues to work on the GNU project, update his website regularly, and campaign as an ardent advocate of free software. Thank you so much for watching, all of you guys. Thank you to all of my 6,000 and something subscribers for continuing to wait for videos to come through. Thank you to people in the Discord, people working on Linux OS, people who have been, staying, waiting for pings, coming back to say hi whenever I pop into the Discord. Basically, anyone who's been supporting me no matter what, through the thick and thin. I really do appreciate it. It has been a very messy year. This has been a very difficult point in my life, not to give excuses, but rather reasons for, why things have been slow. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been waiting. Thank you to everyone who's stuck around, and, that's it. Don't die tomorrow. I certainly won't. More content coming through. And for those of you who have been looking out for that Windows end of life, Windows 10 end of life, coming up soon. Video coming up soon on that too. So stay tuned. Just want to let y'all know, juice is temporary, sauce is forever. Love you guys to death. And that will be all. Please don't die tomorrow, and this has been Learnix TV, signing off.